Hey, good morning, all.
Good morning. All right. It's on.
Good morning, Michigan.
Good morning, Gary. How's it going?
Good.
Good. How's Peg doing?
She's doing fine.
Good.
She'll probably be here in a little while.
Good. That's wonderful. I haven't seen her in quite a while. The last time was at the late, great Marty's Hardware.
Yeah, I know. It's easy to get to lose track of friends in these times.
Say that
People
again?
meet in the grocery store and they meet.
Oh, God, yes. I was at BJ's and disappointed that I didn't meet anybody that I know. Because I usually do. Okay. Well, I've been in touch with the rabbi and no baby yet.
So he posted the link for the text.
I didn't hear you, Bob.
Posted the link for the text.
Okay, I'll be right back. Michael? I have a computer paper on the desk.
Where's Mom?
I stole a little pack of Crayola colored pencils,
Oh, good idea.
stamps, and a regular pen. Like you have an old cutting mat. We'll use that as like a nice spacer. Where's the computer paper? Where?
Right here.
You gotta use it.
We have plenty. You're not muted. It's okay.
Here's your microphone.
Hi, Mishka. I'm muted.
Michael is standing here bossing me around. How are you?
I don't know. I can't hear you.
Oh, at all?
Hold on.
Hold on. I'm not muted.
Yeah, it's Michael.
So after she can hear you,
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good.
I guess tell her that you
Please
can't
request
She knows.
permission from the meeting host.
Just looking for the unmute.
hear what it is. She
I'm
needs
not
to-
muted.
You don't know you're.
How do you-
Peggy's your mom, right?
Hmm?
Oh, wait.
I hear it very well. You're not muted either, Peggy.
You're fine.
Okay.
Is
I hear
the
you just
sound
fine.
up?
Do you hear me now,
Oh, it's too good.
Peg?
It's on your computer there somehow.
Great.
because it's-
Speak again.
Okay.
Okay. It was my problem.
Oh, okay. Maybe that's why Gary's always wearing.
That's right. And he didn't tell me.
So can you both be on at the same time?
Well, yeah, if we unplug the earphones,
Oh, okay.
did you unplug them? We can both be on. Well, anyway, go ahead. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm okay. We right now have grandkid visiting
Great.
and grandkids, so it's very chaotic. But for the while, Liz is out with him taking a walk, and Michael is setting up a little table so he can color. So
It's like 1.5.
2 and 2,
Oh,
almost 2 and 3. No, 2 and 2.
okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Hi, Bob.
And talks and talks and talks and talks and talks and talks, driving them crazy. I said, that's a good way to be driven crazy.
Yes, I'd say so too.
Good
There
morning,
you
Miss.
are. Good morning.
Good morning, good morning.
And you do write well, if brief. If brief.
I was going to say, definitely breathe.
Yes, okay. Good morning, Edith. You had that look like a horrible, like you have your kids. They came out of quarantine. They had been quarantining themselves. Good morning, Linda.
How long are Michael and Liz?
Just for the weekend. Then they're going to her folks.
Oh.
Because he has work in Martha's Vineyard, on Martha's Vineyard,
Oh.
one or the other. So they'll stay with her folks in Worcester. So we shall see. So I'm waiting for the rabbi and for Rabbi Spitzer and Rabbi Lawson.
Did you send them a reminder?
He sent out a reminder.
Well, it was somebody sent in a reminder with his name.
Right.
I got reminders this morning. He just sent it on a chat.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool.
Morning.
Morning.
Oh, good morning, Ann.
I'm going to let Gary take his place back. Just wanted to say hello.
Don't yet, obviously. Just hope everything is fine.
Yeah. Thus far. Thus far. It's dog walking time outside my window.
That happens at 6 o'clock in my house in the morning.
In your house.
No, I take the dog out every morning. It's like he quietly, that's the wake up call. And he will not be ignored. And it's actually okay. It's sort of nice. You come in and then you spend the next couple of hours reading the newspapers that you bring in before the day officially starts. And it actually is a nice routine.
At 6 o'clock in the morning?
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, if you're up and you're used to it, then it's
Yeah, I guess.
before anything else clouds the day.
I guess so. I'm not a morning person. This is,
That's why
Sorry,
Not my dog.
I'm gonna mute. Talk about dog walking, that's what my dog does.
so like Bob and me, you and Randy are on separate screens. Okay.
So is everyone eating a lot of latkes?
No.
Yeah. Oh, we did yesterday. Rob made 3 full batches.
No.
Yeah, one for, each of the kids and for us.
That's wonderful.
Wow.
I have a memory. I grew up outside of Boston, and there was a deli in Copley Square in the city, Ken's, and their famous menu said it was like these 2 large potato pancakes filled with corned beef, rye bread, and coleslaw. I would eat
Ooh.
that right now.
Wow.
Ooh,
It was wonderful.
sounds yummy.
Sounds very yummy.
It's from another time, I'm afraid.
Really? Doesn't exist anymore?
Well, you know, for years I used to join Paul when he was in New York after I retired, and one of our favorite restaurants of the 3 nights was the Carnegie Delicatessen.
Mhm.
And if anyone can picture the hot pastrami sandwiches and that bowl of pickles on the table,
I remember
I
that.
tell you, I mean, there are just sweet memories of delicious things that I think are not available around here.
Well, there used to be Jack's
Yeah,
down on Madison Avenue,
yeah,
but that's a long time ago.
exactly. And I think people's eating habits.
Rabbi Lawson,
Here she is.
you're muted. We
Good
can't
morning,
hear.
you.
There you are. And there's Rabbi Spitzer. Yay.
It's a pleasure to welcome you to this third installment of our community conversations around race and racism in the Jewish community. Today's program is a guided text study which transitions us from looking at the past and present of this issue to envisioning a future based on our sacred texts. I have put in the chat the link to the text which Rabbi Lawson, the text sheet which Rabbi Lawson is going to be teaching from, and I believe that that we will also be sharing the screen at least part of the time. We'll be guided by you in that, Rabbi Lawson, so Rabbi Lawson needs a very little introduction, as this is our third installment, but I will just wish her a mazel tov on the honor that she is receiving either this past week or this coming week from Keshet, or maybe that was previously and I just lost track of the month. Keshet is the national organization for LGBTQ queer community inclusion in the Jewish community. It is based in Boston and is a wonderful, wonderful organization, which I've been involved with for a very long time. Their big gala honored 3 people, including Rabbi Lawson this year. So we're very honored that you're also coming to join us and to teach us on this Sunday morning of Hanukkah. And I think the fact that it's Hanukkah is particularly nice because Hanukkah is all about bringing creative energy into the world, and that creative energy that goes toward the future. And I think that's part of what the hope is with regard to this text study. I want to thank the Sadie Schneider Rosh Chodesh Learning Group for sponsoring this whole series, and the Agudat Achim Adult Education Committee for supporting the work of the Sadie Schneider Rosh Chodesh Learning Group, and for hosting these events on Zoom. For those who were watching the live stream service yesterday, which I wasn't at, we did have some baby excitement in our house yesterday, but it was a false alarm. So after many nighttime hours of labor, it turned out to be practice labor, and we're still on baby watch, which is why here I am. But it's a pleasure to be with you all, and to welcome Rabbi Lawson to our community once again to teach this material, and with hope for a better and more redeemed world. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rabbi Lawson, and And Sandra, if you want me to share the screen or if you want me to enable sharing for you, whatever works for you would be, just let me know.
We're not
Your
here.
sound is not working. You're
Right.
not muted
Oh, yeah.
yet.
Okay.
I've got an external mic and I have to press an additional button. It helps with the sound. I hope you all are doing great. Susan and I went on a really decent bike ride this morning, and if I don't eat something, which I'm doing right now, I will not be a good a good teacher. And so it's one of those bike rides where you just keep going, and then you realize, oh wow, I need to get back home. But I hope everybody is doing well. It's really great to be with you all again. And as Rabbi Spitzer said, we are going to look at some text study. I love doing text study, and I love doing text study that is I will say relevant for, I mean, I think all text study is relevant, but I think if you can make our text speak to the moment, the present moment that we are in, that is, it's always good. And like I usually do before we do any kind of text study, I try to start off with gratitude and focusing on gratitude. Before I do that, the little bit of housekeeping. If you're not muted right now, if you could mute yourself because there's some background noise, and there will be times I will ask you to unmute. But if people aren't muted, then there's like feedback and stuff. And so I'm going to start with some gratitude. I'll do a gratitude blessing, and then I want to ask you all if you could share something that you're grateful for. Either put it in the chat feature. Or unmute yourselves and tell me what you're grateful for. And so, Moda ani lefanecha ruach v'chayam she'azarta bi nishmati b'chem b'cha rabba emunatecha. Thank you, divine source of life, for restoring my soul, renewing my breath of life, and you, the source of life, are awesome. And my thing of gratitude is I love teaching, and I'm really happy to be here. And you know, it's with COVID and everything, it's often hard to be in community. So anytime I get an opportunity to be in community, I'm really grateful for. And so if you're comfortable, either put in the chat something you're grateful for, or also unmute yourself and lift, so we can lift our gratitude up as a community. The other thing, gratitude is important because we're going to be spending a lot of time maybe focusing on things that are not so great. So starting with gratitude is always awesome. Ooh, somebody has a grandson. Ooh, cool. Also, Rabbi Spitzer, I was going to ask you about your baby, so thank you. Practice labor, that's a lot of practice. Please give your wife my love and respect and all of that. Does someone want to dare to unmute?
Well, I wrote it in the, hi, this is Joan.
Hi.
I wrote it in the chat already, but I woke up today to the sun is shining and it's extremely warm. I haven't even checked what the temperature is, but I'm in Woodstock, New York. So we heard there was a big storm coming, you know, in the next like 3 or 4 days.
Mm-hmm.
So I am so grateful for this beautiful warm weather.
Yeah, I hear you. We went on, like I said, we went on a bike ride this morning because next week is going to be really cold. And so it was good to get about 15 miles in this morning.
Thank you.
Jill, I see, it looks like you might be trying to say something, but you're muted. I'm not sure. That's one thing I love about Zoom. I can see people's names even if I don't know you. So I can just say, hey. So keep lifting. Oh, Robert Spitzer, how much time do we have this morning? I want to be mindful.
You can go as with 10:30 to 11:45 or 11:30.
Yeah,
Great.
that's good. I just wanted to make sure I knew. So the next thing that we're going to do is the last time, I mean, I think our first session, I did a prayer, a healing prayer. And today, I'm trying to talk and figure out how to share my screen at the same time. Today, I want to lead us off with another blessing that we say in the morning. That's not it. That's chords. Let's see, where are you? This little thing keeps moving. Sorry. I swear this is not what I'm trying to show you all. This little thing at the top where it says, you know, where it says share, it keeps moving every time I put my cursor over it. There it is, right there. Nope, nope, come on. No. Okay, I'll just search for it. There it is. Okay. So this is a prayer that many say when laying to fill in the morning. And some people say it just because, but it's beautiful because I often tell my students, if you learn one Hebrew phrase, please let it be Ve'ahavta l'recha, to love your neighbor, love your friend, love your fellow, love everyone as you would love yourself. And it's a really good reminder as we encounter people who are different than us or who we may disagree with us. It's a reminder that we should love people. We don't have to agree with them, but we should respect that they are, created in the divine image. And so this is a melody that was created by a guy named Gabriel Meir, and he's an Israeli. And so I'm going to sing it. And if you know it, please chime in. I know muted, and it's like I said before, I think singing is the really good way to get us out of our heads and to ground us. Harini mekabel alai et mitzvan abore ve'ahavta l'recha kamoka l'recha kamoka harini mekabel alai et mitzvat habore ve'ahavta l'recha kamoka l'recha kamoka harini mekabel alai et mitzvat habore ve'ahavta l'recha kamoka l'recha kamoka. So I have another question that I want to ask you all. And I want to invite you to unmute yourselves to answer the question. And if you're not comfortable, you feel free to put it in the chat, but I would like for this to be part of our conversation as we move on. Tell me about a time that you were made to feel radically welcomed in a space, any space. It could be a Jewish space, it could be a non-Jewish space. And if it helps, yes, of course, focus on a Jewish space. But tell me a time where you were made to feel radically welcomed, as if you had always been there. And it didn't matter that you were new, or and if that doesn't work, you can also tell me a time where maybe you weren't made to feel welcome. But I really do want to focus on the positive.
I would like to share my experience when we had just moved to Niskayuna. We picked Niskayuna and the house we bought because it was close to the synagogue. And in Oak Ridge, synagogue participation was very important to us. And I wanted to decrease the amount of time we spent on the road. The first time I walked into the synagogue, everyone here except for you, perhaps Rabbi Lawson, knows the office. You come in, and then the office is down a little hallway to the left. Ahead is this beautiful lobby area and the sanctuary to the left. I walked into the lobby area, turned to look into the sanctuary, and two congregants were coming out of the sanctuary. And upon seeing me, their faces lit up as if I was the most wonderful thing in the world. And they welcomed me warmly. And it was like, man, I like this place. One of the people was Sadie Schneider, who left us money to do things like bring people like you amongst us. And the other one was Shimon Pachter, our ritual director at the time, who now that I look back on him being familiar with Yoda, I think he was our Yoda. And it was just an amazing feeling to be totally new and to be so welcomed. The other thing that happened, we were back in the community for another look around just before Shavuot. It may have been Erev Shavuot. And again, I stopped into the synagogue to ask about the times of services. And a member of the congregation saw me, introduced herself, welcomed. I never got to find out about the time of services, and immediately invited us for dinner that night. And nothing feels more welcoming than sitting down at a stranger's house for dinner in honor of a holiday. Love this community.
Thank you, Roberta. That was awesome. Really awesome. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else?
My story is not terribly different from Roberta's, but it has one twist, which is, as many of you will know, Alexandra, my wife, and I joined this community in 1994, but I didn't become a Jewish member of the community until 1998. And the conversion process was an interesting one to go through, as it usually is. And when all was said and done, the rabbi at that time, Rabbi Konheim, said, I have something for you. It turned out that the community had, I don't know how this was organized or if it was all volunteers, but a rabbi had managed to collect some money for a gift for me on becoming a Jewish member of the community, which is a pair of tefillin, which I hadn't even begun to think, I wasn't that far along in my thinking yet, but was not just a very nice thing that I needed, but also was a commitment by the community to say, you are going to be developing your practice. We're here to help with that. And I was just really blown away that people were nice enough to think of me at all, but to do something as thoughtful as that and kind of reflecting on who I was going to become and giving me assistance with that. So that was a really nice thing about this place. And I would imagine that there might be one or two people here who might have had a hand in that. And I have never been able to thank the people who did that because I don't know who they are, but I'll kind of collectively do it here and hoping I'm reaching one or two of the right people at least.
Thank you, Stephen. Let's do maybe one or two more. I love this. I love hearing these stories of radical welcoming. Because I think, we're going to be talking a little bit about not being welcomed. So this is really cool. But I heard somebody unmute themselves.
Yeah, this is Joan again. I've got a little bit of a different story. First thing that flashed into my mind is being a hippie traveling overland to India and getting to India and starting to go north. In my mind, I was going to be heading up to Tibet by foot. So off I went. Wow. And I started getting into these mountain villages where literally they had never even seen any Westerner, what to speak of a lone woman Westerner. And these were mountain villages where there wasn't a lot of gardening happening because of the terracing and so on. And they would invite me into their homes. They would serve me a dish that had a vegetable, it had a bread. The bread had ghee on it, which is a butter. So that's a cow product, very expensive, very luxurious. And they would give me rice and dal. And I would eat on my own and everybody would serve me. And then the family would eat and they would have rice and dal. And this continued everywhere I went, this radical, welcoming, until I found out that in that culture, the guest is God. And to serve the unknown person, to serve the person who comes as a stranger, is to serve the divinity. And I mean, even thinking about it now, I tear up because I had never experienced such hospitality, such radical welcoming. So I share that with lots of love for those people.
Thank you. So if you want to share another story as we go through, please just hit me up in the chat. It's going to be like a few more minutes before we get to the text. A few more seconds. No. Anyway, one of the reasons why I do this way, where I ask you to share your stories, because it's an awesome one. But another thing I want you all to understand is that when folks with marginalized identities, so people who are Black or brown, or maybe non-gender conforming, or people who may look different than people in your community, when they walk into our Jewish spaces, sometimes they're not given the freedom to tell their stories the way they want to tell their stories. And they're often bombarded with questions of, how are you Jewish? When did you convert? Those kinds of questions that we talked about in our first session. And so giving people the space to tell their own stories when they want to tell their own stories is really good. And you all got to share a time where you were made to feel welcomed. And we all listened and we all got to enjoy it. And so when people come to our communities and they're new, give them also the space to tell their stories when they want to tell their stories the way they want to tell their stories. So you all have the text, and I'm going to try to clumsily share my screen again. And okay, where are you? Share. Okay. So these first two, and this is a participatory kind of text study, I understand. So we're going to talking about, creating an inclusive Judaism for the future. And that's what I've titled this, but really it's just about radical inclusiveness or welcoming. And so I always let's go back in time and let's look at what our texts say about how we are to treat people so that we are grounded in Jewish values. And so this first text, Genesis 1, creation. And so if I could get someone to read Genesis 1:27, either in Hebrew or English, it's fine. Please unmute yourself and read it.
And God created a human being in God's image. In the image of God, God created him. Male and female, God created them.
So what are your thoughts on this text?
It's interesting. First it said God created him, and then God created them. I am puzzled by that, with the male and female stuck in the middle.
Well, in true transparency, this is an older version of the text that I use. I've actually retranslated this. But the word for male, for male in this case, is Adam, which can also be translated as human. But it still works as a translation. And it's just not, it may not sound as inclusive as I want it to. But that is interesting. So how do you think this fits into what we're talking about?
Well, it makes us realize that we're all the same, or that we all come from the same place. Therefore, we are all of the same image of God. And as Rabbi Heschel, I believe, said, nobody can claim a better lineage because our lineages are all the same.
I recently shared this text with some students, and they had said they had never seen it because the text that they had always seen was that Adam was created first. And they were sort of surprised that this was side by side to the one where Adam was created first. And so as you probably know, we have two creation stories. And the one that gets lifted up by many is that the male was created first. And this text says that we were both created at the same time, male and female. There's another issue when we can talk about later if you want about binary gender and things like that. But for the purposes of today, God created male and female both at the same time. And so thinking about how our tradition has often centered maleness and male leadership, this is a proof text that both men and women are equal and should have the same obligations. Any thoughts? Any more thoughts?
Well, I think one could argue that because it says God created him, we weren't created equal.
So what happens if you change that to God created human?
Then that would make a big difference.
Yeah. That's what I was saying earlier about.
Okay, so Adam is human.
Yeah.
Okay.
But just because Hebrew is a gendered language, though, there
Right.
isn't going to be any way to put in a term with the God created X. X is always going to have one gender or the other.
Yeah.
Unless you pluralize it, then you can, even then it'll have a male gender, but there'll be at least an understanding. I had a little bit different reaction to this, which is that there's a repetition that it says in God, created the human being in God's image, in the image of God, God created him. And repetition is often a sign of importance or emphasis. I think it teaches that this is a message that everybody is created in the image of God, is one that is not easy for us to remember, and that it requires this level of emphasis, that we should apply that emphasis ourselves to make sure that we remember this.
Yeah. Awesome. So I'm going to pull up another text. Why does this thing move? There's this little thing that hovers over the top of my screen, and every time I try to pull up a text, it moves. It's from Zoom. Man. Can you guys see this?
We can't see it.
On my screen. Oh my God. Okay, let me try this.
Technology is great when it works.
Okay, this is the next text, but I've added some questions that you guys can see on here. So when we think of an American Jew, tell me, what are the things that you think about? What comes to your mind when you think of an American? What American Jew looks like, or what is the image that you have of an American Jew? And I want to make sure that you all understand this is a safe space. So seriously, whatever comes to mind, it's all good.
It's something I never thought about, quite frankly.
Can you say more?
Well, I am one, and I don't think of myself as particularly any different from anybody else, except that I'm Jewish, and that's pretty much it. I don't give it a lot of thought as to what an American Jew looks like or should look like. It's just a fact.
Okay.
I think maybe the question is, maybe we just all we are used to being American Jews that are white. Or we think of ourselves as part of the greater white community, as opposed to a mixed community.
And to add to that comment, it is evolving. You know, what one originally had as an image certainly has evolved into multicultural, many.
But slow down. I'm asking you right now, when you think of an American Jew right now, today, what comes to mind?
What I found was interesting that the first thing that came to mind was it was a man. And thought for a moment, well, most American Jews that I see, I wouldn't have a clue that they were Jews. Except that there are times something happens which I call bageling. I don't know if anybody else knows that crazy term, but you see something that somebody is wearing or saying that gives you an opportunity to think, is this person Jewish? And like could be somebody wearing a hamsa or a cap that says shalom or something. And it gives you the opportunity to walk to them and say, you know, that's a beautiful hamsa. And then a conversation can happen and you decide, yes, indeed, this person is Jewish. But in that context, I was thinking, man, if I knew or I really thought, probably wearing a kippah. That was my first image.
These are all good. A couple more. And I'm really not fishing for anything. I want us to lift up what we think about what are the images that comes to mind when we think of American Jews?
The other day, we watched a program on YouTube about Jews in Brooklyn. What's her name? Teachout? A woman who ran for governor, I think. Separate. She did a program on the ultra-Orthodox of Brooklyn and the various sects and where they live. And I'm looking at all these different types of Jews, and I'm thinking, I didn't grow up with that. So it was a whole new, I mean, I knew about them, but I didn't grow up with, in a community that had a number of different types of Jewish people, if you will.
I think about, sorry, Roberta. I think about Seinfeld and Sarah Silverman, some kind of self-deprecating public figure, humorous, that sort of speaks to me of the American Jewish experience. I think Seinfeld, like, sort of defined what is an American Jew or a Jew in American culture, or whatever, I think for a lot of folks.
Do you remember that Seinfeld episode where the dentist converted and he started telling Jewish jokes? So they were worried that is it too soon to tell Jewish jokes? And when I think there was also, I don't know, maybe in some conversations I've had, or maybe it was that episode, people were wondering if it was anti-Semitic for him to tell Jewish jokes so soon. So yeah, so all the things that you guys said are great. Like, there are images that come to mind when we think of Jews. There are. That is part of being a human being. It's a I can't remember how sociology defines it, but making assumptions about people is a way for us to protect ourselves and to recognize another. And also sometimes it can kind of work against us, but we make assumptions. It's natural for us to make assumptions when we're trying to figure out where we belong and who's in and who's out. And so all the things that you said, all of you guys said, are great. So the next question here is, how do we unlearn stories that we have been taught about what an American Jew looks like, whether we're talking about Seinfeld or whether we're talking about a Jewish man, or to fill in, or whiteness, or whatever. How do we unlearn those stories? Because we all know that Jews are all over the world, and so how do we unlearn these stories?
By listening to people like you.
I think also, just as we learn by what we see around us. So growing up, the only Jews I knew were white. To what we see around us as we go through life. So now when I used to walk into our congregation Saturday morning and everyone was there, it was like, no, not just white. We have such a mixture in our congregation, gender-wise, race-wise, and it really, I find it kind of exciting. It's no longer plain dull white bread. It's an interesting piece of incredible people. And so I'm learning that being Jewish doesn't mean being white with dark hair.
Yeah. One of the rabbis that I look up to a lot, his name is Rabbi Capers Funay, and he's a rabbi in Chicago. He's a Black rabbi. He's a member of the Board of Rabbis in Chicago. I say that because it was a long, hard battle to get into the Board of Rabbis because they didn't see him as a rabbi. But now he is. He's a well-respected rabbi. He's also Michelle Obama's cousin. That's how a lot of people know him. which made him cool. I thought it was cool long before I found out he was Michelle Obama's cousin. But one of the things that's interesting is that I've had a similar experience that Capers Fidei has had, and I'll describe. Capers said that Rabbi Capers said he was in a synagogue once, and he had tefillin, he had a kippah on, and he had a talit on, and he was praying, and a member came over to him and said, "Are you Jewish?" And he said, "No." And as he said, "I found these items outside." And I just I put them on and came in here and wanted to see what, of course, yeah, he's Jewish. That was his response. So for me personally, if I saw any person with tefillin on, a kippah, and a prayer shawl, I would just assume they were Jewish. But for many people, that's not. The whiteness, I guess, prevailed. But I had a similar experience. I was not as funny as Capers. I was just sort of surprised somebody was asking me. I wasn't wearing tefillin, but I was wearing a prayer shawl, and I was wearing a kippah. And I was with other people who had similar attire on as well. So the stories that we tell can often make people feel unwelcome. So this text that we're going to look at right now, this text, as far as I am concerned in my teaching, this is like central to speaks to this moment of understanding that we are, I'll let you read the text. So somebody can read this text, Exodus 12:38, either in Hebrew or English, and then we'll talk about it.
Moreover, a mixed multitude went up with them, and very much livestock, both flocks and herds.
So to tell you where this text is coming from, this text is, so as the Israelites are fleeing Egypt, plague after plague, and Pharaoh has decided to let the Israelites go. And so we are leaving, and this text is like, moreover, a mixed multitude went up with them, very much the livestock, both flocks and herds. So what does this tell you about the people who left Mitzrayim, left the narrow place, left Egypt?
They were a mixture of people. They weren't all one kind. They weren't all white. They weren't all black. They weren't all brown. They weren't all whatever. It was a mixture, like the can of mixed nuts.
Inclusive.
Well, also the mixed multitude of the animals.
Say more.
That there too, it implies that there is a mixture, that is not of one kind, not just one stripe.
That's true, but it is continuing to make distinction. So these are the Jews who went up, and these are the non-Jews who went up, or a different group, and these are the animals that came up. And I'm a little disturbed by the proximity of the mixed multitude to the animal. I would like to think the mixed multitude was seen as being closer to the Jews than they were to the livestock, but this verse doesn't give me much to go on to get there.
Well, it gives me the sense just that that out of a mixed bunch of livestock, there are lots of different kinds.
Well, also
that parallels lots of different kinds of people.
Also, livestock was wealth, and so it wasn't just that these animals. Oh, people and animals. Yeah, no, the animals are wealth, are sources of food, are sources of wealth, and that was an
value
thing, value that they brought out of with them. Which gave them a certain status.
Yeah, and I'll jump in. So there's a mixed multitude of people who left Egypt. So we can look at them from a racialized lens and say they're not black, they're not white. We can also look at them as they weren't all Israelites. Some of them might have been Egypt. Some of them might have been. We don't know who they were. I personally think that livestock in this case represents wealth. So that means, poor people, not so poor people, because you had to have, well, if you owned livestock, then you had some kind of wealth. And when I teach my students this text, I have to, I get them to understand, like, imagine there was a budding relationship. You fell in love. Let's just say I'll just pick a gender. You fell in love with a boy or a girl. Yeah, you fell in love with a girl. And the girl is an Israelite and you're not. And you fall in love with the girl, but the girl's like, this is really cool. I really like you, but my parents tell me I have to go follow Moses in the desert because we've been slaves, and so I need to go. And so now you who like the girl, you have a decision to make. You can stay in Egypt or you can follow the girl. And so maybe some of those people followed the girl because they were in love and they are now part of the mixed multitude. And as you know, then we get to Mount Sinai, and we accept revelation and we become one people. One of the things that I love about this text, there's a lot of things that I love about this text, there's so much going on in this little bitty text here, is that the first two words, Vagam, or the first Vagam Erev Rav, which most translators translate as moreover, a mixed multitude. And I actually just wrote an essay about this in a publication that will, for the Reform movement, that will be out at some point in time. But Vagam can mean and also. And so I sort of see this as the Torah wants us to remember, and also a mixed multitude of people went up with them. It's as if, please don't ever forget that we were and always have been a mixed multitude of people. And that's one of the reasons why I love this text. And there's so much other stuff happening in this text. And I actually have taught an hour on this text alone, because it is such a great text, but we got to move on. So question, why might the Israelites have benefited from being a diverse community?
A larger gene pool.
I have to share something. We're family now. There's a synagogue that I love, and they have amazing music. And I was playing one of their CDs for a rabbi friend of mine who lives out of the country, but she was in the country. And she's like, what is this? And so she's like, I love it. And then she loved the music. And she said, that's the perfect, I can't remember how she phrased it, but she's like, that's why we need to mix up the gene pool, better music. Anyway, it's a congregation, Beit Havarim. They have wonderful music. If you check it out, it's my home synagogue. And they actually have a new CD coming out really soon. But anyway, so mixing up the gene pool. Can you say more about that?
That just makes a healthier community. There's more variety, and it's instead of a monoculture, it's a varied culture, and more likely to be successful.
Like that.
Tay-Sachs disease is a result of not having a monoculture. So the multitude makes us healthier.
Yeah.
And they would have had different perspectives. The perspectives of people who had not been slaves, perhaps. Some of those perspectives would have been not Jewish. And those people would have had, to debate, but there's value in having people along who, for whatever reason they wanted to leave Egypt, had not presumably all been slaves.
Your first question about what do we think of an American Jew is, as we were talking, I was thinking it's been about 75 years since the end of World War II, and Jews think about the Holocaust and who was in the Holocaust. A lot of white European Jews went through and died during the Holocaust, and that imprinted. And so maybe that has caused us to think of American Jews that way, and it's now beginning to change.
Thank you. So maybe one more thought on why might the Israelites have benefited from being a diverse community?
Well, I think it might have been an exercise in learning how to accept other people. And you can't, if you're going to be a diverse community that succeeds, which is not necessarily one that happens, you have to learn how to live with other people.
Mm-hmm.
You're also bringing in different talents.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Yeah.
Also, going along with what Henry was saying about the loss in the Holocaust, we have 6 million people to replace. And there's a diversity if we can bring in 6 million more on top of what we have now, it would be so lovely.
So the next question is, when do communities benefit from homogeneity?
Always.
Well, when they benefit from homogeneity, in theory, there should be a lot of people getting along because they share whatever background, education, and so on. We're all the same.
Mm-hmm.
But reading on to the question, when do they benefit from diversity? We were kind of answering that. But through all of that, I was thinking as the Holocaust was brought up, we think of the Ashkenazi Jews, but there were unfortunately Jews from Greece and other places that were in that pool. And yet we don't talk about it that way. We think about Poles and we think about other Eastern Europeans. I'm from a German background. People don't ever talk or seldom talk about German victims of the Holocaust. And we still have this diversity of Ashkenazi and Sephardi, and in Israel, it's a very dangerous thing. Sometimes you have the two. We have left over from the British mandate. We have an Ashkenazi rabbi and we have a Sephardi rabbi, and they don't always get along. And the communities see each other very differently, and not necessarily positively.
In my experience, and I'm old, and originally a Yiddish speaker, it was the Litvaks and the Galicianas who didn't get along. Where you came from in Eastern Europe, and how you spoke your Yiddish could divide you. And it was a big deal if a Litvak married a Galiciana.
So getting back to homogeneity, why? Because I know we don't talk about, a lot of times we talk about diversity, but what are some benefits to homogeneity? Like, believing that we're all the same, look the same, think the same, born the same place.
It makes it a lot easier to conduct a meeting.
My son went to Brandeis, and when he went for his to check it out, to decide he wanted to go there, and when he came home, he said that they get me, which he wasn't getting here in Niskayuna all the time. I mean, he had a lot of Jewish friends, he had a lot of diversity and friendships, but he couldn't tell a joke or make a remark that everybody would understand.
I haven't heard anybody say feel safe. Maybe homogeneity makes us feel safe or gives us the idea that we're safe.
You can take that too far. You can feel too safe. And then all of a sudden you do something that's really you, and people are looking at you out of the corner of their eyes while you're dancing in the aisle with the Torah or something that they don't do. They're too buttoned down to let go like that. So yeah, you can get lulled into a feeling of safety, and then all of a sudden you're the other.
Yeah. If you ever want to dance, wherever I am, if you're there and you have a Torah and you want to dance on it out, please. I have a student, when we leave, we have services. She will dance. She'll get other students to dance on the screen.
I dance, I twirl. I just let go. It's so
That's awesome. I think it's awesome. Okay. So any other thoughts about homogeneity before we move on? Okay. So Exodus 23. Let's read 23, Exodus 23, and then Isaiah at the same time. So if someone wants, or back to back. So if someone wants to read the Exodus text, and then if someone reads the Isaiah text, and we'll talk about them.
You shall not oppress a stranger, for you know the feelings of the stranger, having yourselves been strangers in the land of Egypt.
For my house shall be called a house of prayer for all peoples.
Okay. So the Exodus text, this is the you shall not oppress a stranger. Many of you probably know that some version of this appears no less than 36 times in the Torah. And any thoughts on these two, on Isaiah or Exodus or both?
Well, they all say the same thing, which is everybody's should be there. All peoples, strangers, people you know, everybody should be part of the house of prayer for all people, that it's not my house shall be called a home for prayer for all people.
Yeah. Amen.
And all people should be, or it implies all people.
Yeah, all people.
My father used to describe this idea from Isaiah like a bunt cake with the Kodesh HaKodashim, the Holy of Holies, as the empty space in the center of the bunt cake, and every different people, every different way of worship would get a slice that is like one loop of the bunt pan, so that everybody is facing inward. We're every nation be facing inward toward the Kodesh HaKodashim, but being able to worship in an infinite circle of possibilities. I kind of like that image. Isaiah's universalism here is a profound sense. I do worry about the difference between diversity within Jewish community versus the broader diversity of the world. That is to say, these texts are not all differentiating between those two kinds of diversity. That is to say, from my perspective, I want to raise up voices that emphasize diversity within Jewish particularism, as opposed to voices that just acknowledge diversity within the universal humankind. Because of course there's diversity in the universal humankind, but for our topic, for our focus, we also want to be able to honor and feel safe with and secure within a Jewish community that is diverse. Like universalism is all well and good, but Judaism is a particularist religion that also needs to acknowledge the diversity within our particular context.
So it's really interesting that you said that, because and nobody's ever actually brought it up that way. But what I want people to understand is that American Jewry is changing, and is changing really fast. Not fast for me, but fast for many people who are steeped in a way of practice and being and looking a certain way. And so American Jewry, and this is we're particularly talking about American Jews. American Jewry is starting to look like America. So whatever diversity you have in America, you're going to have in our Jewish spaces. And so for many people, that means, like, I read an article recently, this is what's in my head. I often teach about what's in my head. There was a story, I didn't read the whole story, but something about it was either a Korean Jewish family or a Japanese Jewish family or something, and they were making like sort of a fried Asian dish instead of latkes. Now, for many people, that may not seem Jewish, but for this family, it was very Jewish. And so I do believe in particularism, but we have to understand what Judaism looks like today versus what Judaism looked like a generation ago. And so, like I said, whatever diversity we have in the United States, we're going to also see in our Jewish community. So that means even things like our music is not going to sound like, it came from Eastern Europe. If you look at Jewish music today, it started to sound like American music with American influence. One of my favorite Jewish bands is Nefesh Mountain. It's bluegrass, Jewish, and it's Jewish music, but it's bluegrass infused. And thank you, Rabbi Spitzer, for bringing that up, because what I want people to understand is that we are an incredibly diverse people who look and feel like Americans. It's just our particular way of being is Jewish, and for some of us that's the same, and for some of us it's not.
Well, there's always the question, how do you introduce yourself to people? Are you an American Jew or a Jewish American? That comes up a lot.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Can you say more about that?
It's, I don't know, maybe it's self-evident. Maybe it's just a conversation that I've had with people that we ask each other, how do you see yourself first as an American? Or does it not matter?
Do you think your answer would change if you were, like, let's say, in Israel?
It's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
No.
I suppose I might say American Jew in some ways to identify myself that I'm not an Israeli. On the other hand, I might say Jewish American because it says I'm part of you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't really think much about like that. And so that's why I was asking if your answer would change. I'm not sure how I am. I have to think about that if I've even answered that question. But I think if I did, it was definitely when I was in Israel, because I think it matters more there. So any more comments about, before we move on, these texts from the Tanakh or the Torah?
I do have my passport ready.
Well, it's sort of interesting.
There's a story with that.
Okay. It's sort of interesting to look at the cabinet President-elect Biden is looking to create to resemble the whole United States, not just what has historically. And it's an interesting comparison at this time, as much is emerging.
So like there was a YouTube video of Igbo, I can't pronounce it correctly, Jews in Nigeria. And there was a YouTube video and they were singing a Jewish song, but they were singing it steeped in the way that they sing music there. And the comment section in wherever I saw this was, for many people, they're like, that's not Jewish. And other people were saying, listen to the words, it's actually Jewish. It is Jewish. Because it didn't, the music, the melody didn't seem familiar. So for many people, it felt not Jewish, but it was just a different tradition. Okay, so I'm going to stick, so you all have this text, and I want you all, if you want to, you all have this whole, this text that I'm ahead of myself. So these sources I have been compiling since I was a rabbinical student. And every time I teach this, I teach it differently depending on where I am in my current space in head and who I'm talking to. But you guys have this. It's a source sheet that is on Safaria. If you don't know about Safaria, it's an amazing resource. I have changed it, made adaptations to it. I can, this is a PDF because I've saved it as a PDF so that it doesn't move around, but I can also send you the Safaria link so you can see it as I make changes to it. And it's a public source sheet, which I think is great. It's also on Trua's bibliography for on racial justice or something like that. Okay, so we're going to skip this section on love. We sang it at the beginning. It's a sections from the Talmud that talk about what it means to love your neighbor. And we're going to go down to some contemporary text. And I really hope this, oh, wow, this went fast. You guys talk, this is great. So let me jump down to here because okay. So we're going to talk about some contemporary text. And as you're doing this, as you're reading this, I also want you to think about your own communities. And these are just like thoughts for you to think about as you make sure that your space is welcoming to all. And so this next text that I want to look at is Rabbi Leah Moser. Rabbi Leah Moser, just so you know, just to give you some background, is a graduate from the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College, a trans female rabbi. And she's a rabbi in a synagogue in New Jersey. I can't remember which one, but an amazing rabbi who, speaking of Jewish music, has a bunch of like tech music. I don't know what it's like, house music or something, like it's like electronic music. And I walked one day, she was leading services at RRC, and I was like, what? It was like, I felt like I had jumped into a club, but it was her and her electronic stuff doing, O'Donnell, I don't even remember what she was saying, but she did the whole service with this tech music. But anyway, so if someone could read this text from Leah Moser.
We need to do a better job of recognizing and including non-Jewish partners and other members of the mixed multitude who form an important and vital part of our communities. Rather than hold these people at arm's length as uncomfortable reminders of our failure to adhere to our ancestors' rigid ethnic boundaries, we ought to reach out to them, making a place for them, both ritually and organizationally within our communities.
Thoughts?
That's very easy to do in a city like Schenectady when we are definitely a minority and we do things in the community, various charitable operations like the Boys and Girls Club or hospice or something like that, because we generally are a handful within a larger community of participants. So I find personally that's a very easy thing to do here.
I guess to me, making a place for them ritually and organizationally means like having non-Jewish board members or possibilities for non-Jews to participate in our worship services. That feels a little different to me, Mark, than joining with non-Jews in chesed work that we do in the broader community. Not to say that that chesed work isn't also really important and a way of creating and building community among people of diverse backgrounds. But making a place for them ritually in our worship, for example, that's a little different.
Yeah, and I also want to add, like, you know, families, in my opinion, families today are making a choice to raise their children Jewish, to be part of a Jewish community, even if only one parent is Jewish. And so we should welcome them, and many communities don't, and many communities are only interested in the Jewish parent. Where I know many non-Jewish mothers who are constantly taking their kids to Hebrew school, studying, helping their kids study for their their bar bat mitzvah portion or doing whatever they can to raise children Jewish. And so we have a lot of non-Jews raising Jewish kids.
One comment I would like to make for Agudat Achim in the Vision Committee is reaching out to non-Jewish members who perhaps have not are not converting, but need to understand the ritual and the prayer more.
Right.
And this is a complement to what's happening, I think, today, and there are plans for this.
Yeah, no, that's great. I actually recently had a wonderful conversation with a female rabbi, a friend of mine, who wants to grow in this area. She's a really great rabbi, so I'm not trying to present that she's not. But I will say, for her, it's all about, or at least it was a month ago, making it easier for people to convert. And I pushed her. I said, well, what if they don't want to? And she's like, but if I make it easy, I said, but what if they don't want to? Then what do you do? And so we need to recognize, and I think what Rabbi Lay is getting to here, and remember that over 51% of our Jewish community is intermarried. And families make choices for whatever reason they make choices. For example, my wife is not Jewish, but my wife also cooks most of the food, makes challah every week for our students when we were in person, made sure students had homemade latkes when we did Hanukkah in person. Tonight we're having someone in our pod come over for sufganiyot and latkes. I don't make these things. We only have one religious tradition in our house, and my wife and I are, making personal decisions around all those things. And so there are many reasons why people may not want to convert. And we've moved from, thinking that a generation ago, like we didn't like interfaith married couples. Now we realize it's a thing we have to do, but we're still ignoring the fact that there might be people who may not want to convert. And we're so focused on either getting them to convert, or we're focused on focused on the Jewish person and not the non-Jewish person. Am I making sense? I hope.
I have a story about a family in the congregation where the young woman married somebody who isn't Jewish. They made a deal that she would take his name, which she was not wanting to do because that's not what some of us do at this point, if he would raise the children with her as Jews. And the really sweet piece that the mom of the Jewish mom, that the in-law, that the non-Jewish spouse, his mother, takes the kids to Hebrew school. That's her, part of her, one of the parts that she plays in the family. But another thing was when I joined the synagogue about 40 years ago, the non-Jewish spouses really had no particular role to play. And at some point, it became such that the non-Jewish spouse still was now standing at the bima during the bar bat mitzvah of their child. And it became far more likely that a non-Jewish member of the family was invited to do some of the parts, in particular the blessings for peace for the country, became something because it was in English and because it wasn't necessarily part of the actual service. And that's just a wonderful thing that they are not excluded.
Yeah, I agree. So
there was a time that wasn't the case.
So this next text, it's part of a longer essay, and I've cropped this out, and I can send you the link later. But I'll give you a background on the essay itself. It was written by Rabbi Joshua Lesser, rabbi in Atlanta. It's part of the Reconstructing Judaism Evolved series. And he writes about when they got they got a building. So here's this, it's kind of interesting. The building that they have is in the Orthodox area of Atlanta, Georgia. There's a gay-founded synagogue. It was initially owned by Young Israel. and they needed to sell it. So they reached out to Beit Havarim because they wanted it to go to Jews. So here's this, like, you know, sort of as far from orthodoxy as you could possibly get synagogue in the middle of the Orthodox community in Atlanta, which is kind of cool. So anyway, so they got this new building. It's a beautiful building. And members wanted to bring in art. And he writes about a member who came in with some artwork to dedicate it to the synagogue. And before he opened it, he asked her what it was. And then he asked her to describe what it looked like. And so the art was probably a bearded man or bearded men with tefillin, a talitot or talit or whatever, but Orthodox looking. And so he writes this whole essay about how important it is that our images should reflect who we actually are, because that contributes to the stories that we tell about Jews. And I think I mentioned this the first time we met, that many synagogues are still lifting up images of a bygone era that we want to honor. I'm not saying that we shouldn't honor it, but we have these images in our synagogues of men with beards, and look like they're from the shtetls in Eastern Europe, or they look Orthodox, and no one in our communities reflect that. And his essay is talking about our images to reflect the diversity that exists in our actual community. And so the last part of the essay is these sort of things that he writes to help communities be more welcoming. And so if I could get someone to read the first paragraph, and then we can read the guidelines together, if someone wants to volunteer.
We also must think about how people are treated when they walk into the building. There are still ways that Jews of color and multiple ethnicities are ignored, mislabeled, subjected to inappropriate assumptions or questions. It is important to be overt with the congregation. What I've learned to do when I see a new person come to Shabbat services, when we sat near each other and I did not know them, I would ask them if they were familiar with our prayer book and, help explain what page we were on and so forth. If they were familiar, fine. If they said no, they weren't, I would try to help them along, because in our prayer book, we jump around a lot. It's not asking if they're Jewish or anything along that line, because I can go into a synagogue and I will be totally unfamiliar with their prayer book and be totally lost.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what Josh says, that he sends this out with these guidelines. We have regularly sent out to our community communications with these 5 guidelines, and let's read them and talk about them. And so I'll read the first one, and then someone can jump in to read the second one. So when encountering another person, that comes in our community, avoid making assumptions about gender identity, sexual orientation, religious identity, Jewish background, race, or reasons for joining us. So if someone wants to read number 2.
Respect a person's identity and self-label, and respect a person's chosen name and pronouns. Do not comment about whether a name sounds Jewish or not.
Do not comment on whether someone looks Jewish or not.
Do not assume people want to only speak about their identity, particularly when their identity is different from yours. Engage them in conversation and get to know them. Be engaged rather than curious. Be engaging rather than curious, sorry.
Number 5.
Do not expect a guest to immediately become your resource on understanding their identity.
Questions, thoughts about this?
Rabbi, in the first lecture, I believe you ended it saying something to the effect, was it the next 10 to 20 years or 10 years, when our congregations will have a percentage of Black and other groups of people, all congregations. Would you repeat that statistic?
Yeah, so I don't remember exactly what I said, but I'll say what I know, which is, right now, depending on the last 3 studies that have talked about Jewish demographics, put Jews of color anywhere between 10 to 15 to 20% of the American Jewish population are Jews of color. And so that's a growing number, and all the statistics that I've seen in the last 20 years kind of say the same thing. And so it's really important for us to recognize the diversity, the racial diversity that exists within the Jewish community, even if we don't have that racial diversity in our own community. Because of intermarriage, adoption, and just being Americans, American Jews are quickly becoming more racially diverse. And like I said, they're starting to look like Americans. So whatever statistics of diversity you have in the American population, you're also going to see in the Jewish community.
I would like to make a comment about older people and gender identity. I have an absolutely wonderful liberal friend in Tennessee. She is a blueberry in a bowl of cherries down there. And at some point, the last time we were spending time together, which was a year ago, July, gender identity came up. And she was totally befuddled and discombobulated by that. She just could not wrap her head around it. And I think for a lot of older people, and she is, I think, past 80, it is hard to come to terms with the changes in our society and accepting people as who they are, as opposed to who we would like to think they are. And I think a lot of patience needs to be extended,
of course,
to older people. And when we've all kicked the bucket, it's going to be much easier for people of various gender identities to find a welcoming place in our synagogue.
Right. I think, I just want to add that, I think people do understand that, but there's a difference between trying and not trying. So, if I say to you, that I don't really want to talk, I just met you and I don't want to talk about how I'm Black and Jewish, then people should respect that. But if you push me, that's not trying.
Right.
Or if I say my pronouns are he and I present as a female and you're confused by that, that's okay. But don't say, well, you're not a female. I mean, you're not a whatever, you're not a male. There's a difference. So there is some grace. There is grace extended to people, but I think there's a difference, like I said, between trying and not trying.
I think also what we're exposed to makes it easier. For example, through my involvement in Planned Parenthood, among the services we are now providing is for transgender people. And because of being part of this transition to offering services to everyone, it's less weird for me. Whereas my friend in Tennessee, not having been exposed to any conversation along that line, she does find it befuddling. But she's smart and she's learning.
And it's not perfect. I mean, I'm someone who teaches this stuff and I mess up pronouns too. Like I may misgender someone. And what we do in those moments is we forgive ourselves and we move on and we try to do better the next time. But sometimes people get stuck in like, oh, I'm not doing this right. And yeah, you're right. I mean, my very young students who have sort of been brought up in this he, she, they culture, much easier for them. I'm someone who definitely accepts the broad terminology of pronouns, but I mess up sometimes. I mean, that's just part because I came from a different generation.
And you're young.
Thank you. It's when you work out, when you hang out with college students, they can quickly make you feel old.
Well, getting back to these 5 rules when encountering another person, I'm sorry. getting back to these 5 rules, I think what I notice about them is that those are things I never would have noticed, at least some of them. And I know I, quote, should, unquote, know this as a sensitive human being. But he said, be overt. And it's really useful to see these down, there in black and white. And yes, oh my goodness, I could have made that mistake. So I'm glad to have seen these.
Yeah, and I think thank you for that. And I think what many people may not understand is that no one is saying, I don't believe in my hearts of hearts that synagogues, JCCs, Jewish communities are not welcoming. They just need to do better at welcoming. And I think many people don't understand that when a person of color comes into the community and the first things out of your mouth are, when did you convert, or how are you Jewish? For many people who are white, for whatever reason, they see that as curiosity. I don't actually see that as curiosity. I see that as trauma. But yeah, and I'll say more about that in a second. But they see that as being curious. But for the person of color, that's offensive because they've heard it multiple times, and all it does is it sends messages that I'm not welcomed. And Jewish communities need to understand. They need to learn, get a practice of what to do and what not to do when new people come into our communities, and then you make change. And the reason I said trauma is because I know a lot of Jews of color around the world, and I've been in physical spaces with them. And one thing we will all say is that, and I'm not trying to say applies to all Jews of color, but I don't know another Jew of color who's had a Jew of color ask them about their Jewish identity. I have tons of Jews of color who are friends, and the only thing that matters to me is that they're Jewish. Some I know their backstory, some I don't, and I'm fine with that. And so we need to ask ourselves, if you already know someone's Jewish, how and why does it matter how that came to be? And are you asking the same questions of everyone that you meet? And so the trauma part is when I'm often in Jewish spaces and I say, I'm here to pray, I want to eat, whatever, I want to, go on about my day. And then the white person is pressuring me or pressuring the Jew of color to know this piece of information. That's about boundaries. And you have to ask yourself, why are you pushing someone's boundaries? Because that makes people feel not safe. And that's where the trauma comes in, because there's something that's happening to you as a white person that makes you can't move past this piece of information to let this person go about their day. So I know that we are at time. I'm not trying to rush off, but I'm happy to continue this conversation for a little bit, but I know I'm over time. So I just wanted to acknowledge that.
I would like you to continue.
I'll just say, I think we'll, so that nobody feels like we're keeping them longer than is appropriate. When we get to the noon mark, I'll just close the room so that nobody feels like there's an obligation to stay or not to stay. But for the next 5 minutes, we can continue to hang out.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Of course. Meg, yes.
Hi, my name is Meg. I'm part of the Woodstock, New York, Woodstock Jewish Congregation, Kehilat Lev Shalem, Rabbi Jonathan Kligler. And we've tried, very hard to have everyone wear a name tape, a name label, and to give one. We have greeters, services, give people. And there's so much resistance to it. I think it worked for a year, and then it was really petering out. Now, clearly, if somebody is of color, you notice that. If someone's wearing a label and they put their last name on it and it's O'Brien, it makes you wonder, But so these bring up all these assumptions. But when in this rabbi says respect a person's identity and self-label, how is it? What do you suggest in all of your experience of how to get people to accept that first step of letting people share their self-label? And with that, should people be wearing a label with their name? and their gender, preferred gender, pronouns? And how do you get people to understand the importance of it?
I think a lot of, sorry.
Go ahead, Rafi, go ahead.
I think a lot of it has to do with having good, well-trained ushers, greeters, what I like to call floor gabais, the service coordinator, the persons whose responsibility it is to connect with the people who are being honored with their honors. We have to be actively training them in diversity and inclusion. One thing that we've done in our community, but I don't think a lot of people know about it, is the ritual committee approved a third way of calling people to the Torah. So you don't have to be called Ya'amod or Ta'amod, your name, Ben or Bat, son or daughter of your parents' names. You can be called to the Torah, Na La'amod, please stand up. Your name, Mibit, from the house of, and then your parents' names. And that is completely gender neutral. And there are ways to do it even in a gendered language like Hebrew. It's a little stilted. It's a little awkward for native speakers or even for learners of Hebrew to choose this other way of constructing the grammatical sentences. But there are ways to do it in a way that honors people's identity. But the only way that works is if the gabais, right, the floor gabai, makes sure to know how a person would prefer to be called. And so, we did discuss that in the ritual committee. There are ways to do this better. And we can get better. There are best practices. I myself am a big fan of name tags. I think it's a very nice thing to do.
I mean, think about the names, like the fact that I can see your names. I can then say, thank you, Roberta. Thank you, Edith. Thank you, Mishka. Like I can say all these things, and it personalizes all of it. I am also a big fan of name tags. Like we got our student board members to wear name tags at our events, so that new students that come in can see who the leadership is, and then they can like gravitate to them. But this takes work. Like this is not, for many people, this isn't easy, and so it just takes work for us to relearn or to learn a better way of welcoming people.
I wonder, in the context of asking somebody if they're going to take an aliyah, or take part in the service in any way, how can you avoid asking them if they're Jewish, if they have that identity, who they are, without it being violating those 5 precepts that were listed? How do you do that without saying, would you like an aliyah? And somebody could say, well, I'm not Jewish. Or
that's it.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it. My sense is that people who know that they are not Jewish will just refuse to accept an honor. They will just say, oh, thank you so much for asking. I'm not Jewish and I'm not going to take it. Right.
Well, that's what I'm hoping. That's the way.
That's it. So I think you can ask anyone with no assumptions, because then the onus is on them to accept or not accept.
Right. Well, that's the way I would hope it has come.
But also I want to say though too, which I totally agree with, but I have been in a synagogue where I had on all the attire, Sukkot Zimra. I was with a group of people. We were, singing. There wasn't a lot of people there. They were looking for people with honors, and someone from that synagogue leans into my row to ask my friend Charlie 2 spaces down who was Jewish. But every one of us had on garb that made us look Jewish. And so, I think that if, those are sometimes race will interfere with who we think Jews are. And so I think if you see someone who has on the appropriate attire and has been singing and praying in the right language or whatever, that it is fair to assume that they are, and also then ask them if they want an aliyah. And if some crazy reason they're not and they're wearing all that stuff, then
Thank you, everyone.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
This
you,
is great.
Rabbi Lawson.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.